It's March 10th, 2026, and it's said that B-2 stealth bombers have slammed Iran's hardened ballistic missile launchers again just last night with 2,000-pound penetrators. And this has been a campaign for them over the last week or so, slamming these 2,000-pound penetrators into the hardened ballistic missile sites of Iran. And also some rumors coming out of President Trump's speech just last night is that Iran was working to turn Pickaxe Mountain into their newest uranium enrichment site. And that's even deeper than the sites that were struck during Operation Midnight Hammer. Some rumors say Pickaxe Mountain is 300 feet down under solid granite because Iran is upping the ante, right? They saw that their sites got struck in Operation Midnight Hammer, so likely they tried to build them in Pickaxe Mountain. That's that granite fortress that's buried deep in the Zagros Mountains where Iran thought they could hide nuclear reconstitution efforts under way more rock than before. So did the B-2 strike this as well? We haven't gotten reports from that yet, but there are reports that the B-2s are striking those ballistic missile bunkers, and last night was a big round of those strikes. This is massive. We're talking American air power punching through defenses that Tehran has spent years building, because right now the rhetoric is level 11. Oh, and the IRGC said they would not allow 1 liter of oil to flow out of the Middle East until they say so, because they're obviously in charge of everything. But this is the Straits of Hormuz right now. There is oil flowing through it, and this is likely one of the main reasons why we're seeing the price of oil come down. The ships that are going through here are turning off their transponder so they can't be targeted by some of the rudimentary targeting system from the Iranian regime that likely use transponders to target. So some anti-ship missiles, drones, basically these ships are being extremely smart, turning off their transponders and continuing the flow of oil to the world. Also, the US Navy is there with the big stick in case the IRGC gets a little bit too handsy with any of these oil tankers. But it's important that we know that the IRGC's rhetoric is, we're in charge. Well, we are determining whether oil flows through the straits or not. No, actually, IRGC, you're not. The US Navy is. But the US military, along with the B-2, B-1, and B-52, are crippling missile threats that could continue to rain hell on the allies in the Gulf states that we've seen recently, with more strikes, but a lot less happening over the last few days. And this sends a crystal clear message that no bunker is safe when the US decides it's time. So stay locked into this video because we're breaking down these strikes themselves, why Pickaxe Mountain is such a nightmare of a target, and how B-2 crews might have cracked it without even going all the way into that 300 feet of depth. And then US CENTCOM released this just an hour ago. B-1s, Prisms, F-18s, B-52s. You're not going to see the B-2s in these photos because, again, they're blasting off likely from the homeland, likely from Missouri in the US, striking ballistic missile targets. And this one right here is interesting because it's in a hillside. You can see a vent shaft over the top. And what they do is they just back it out, they fire the weapon, and they pull it back in. And in their minds, they think it's much harder for the US to find. But as you can see, B-2s, F-22s, F-35s, finding these things and striking them. F-22s, F-35s, getting the coordinates, finding the signature of these, and then passing that information to B-2s is definitely a plausible situation and scenario, along with F-15Es, F-18s going in and striking these as well. Now, again, here's some fact checking that I thought was interesting when it comes to CENTCOM. They're doing a great job of debunking a lot of the lies from Iran, but this one gets very interesting. Check this out. They say Russian and Iranian media claimed earlier today that a U.S. Patriot missile missed while intercepting an Iranian missile or drone and inadvertently hit a neighborhood in Bahrain. Lie. What really happened, an Iranian drone struck a residential neighborhood, injuring 32 civilians in Bahrain, including children who required medical treatment, according to Bahrain's government. So even Russia is getting in on the mix. The propaganda machine of Russia is now helping the propaganda machine of Iran. And President Trump even said in a speech that the war could be over soon and that it's mostly complete. So what do I think he's hinting at there? I think the military objectives, as far as the targets that need to be struck, to then just let the IRGC spin their wheels. Right now, the IRGC is like, well, we have enough supplies, we have enough stockpiles that these strikes haven't immediately affected their life yet. But just wait a couple weeks, because these targets being struck, the IRGC not having a safe haven is now going to be put in a vulnerable position. So when President Trump says mostly complete, I think he's talking about a lot of the different military targets and sites that have been struck. And then CNN is putting out some propaganda about how new footage of the strike on the girls' school in Iran could show that the US is responsible. However, I always think it's funny how CNN gives credit to the Iranian regime. They're like, they're stand-up guys. Of course the footage they released, it was just a coincidence that someone was right there to record it at the exact time. And it was just a coincidence that a Tomahawk missile was used that is proliferated around the world. So could have Iran have gotten their hands on one? Sure. Now, there'll be a full investigation as to how that happened, but it's very interesting that the strike on the girls' school is reported to have happened on February 28th, the day of the start of the war. Interesting. It's almost like there could have been a plan early on for Tehran to strike their own school and then tell the world, look what happened to us. Oh, this is terrible. So, the propaganda wing of Iran striking that school early. Wow, that just is a really big coincidence, because if you're a propaganda arm, you're going to let propaganda like that come out as soon as possible, because the regime sees that as a way to save themselves. And I know CNN thinks that these guys are great and they would have them over for their next dinner party and just allow them to move into their house. But I'm telling you, these IRGC guys, the way this regime thinks is different. Having been in combat against insurgents, just like this regime, terrorists, just like this regime, you see the worst of human nature. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to people who haven't been in a conflict before or don't really understand the use of military force or how the enemy reacts in a conflict where a regime is just solely trying to save themselves. So it is plausible to me. Now, there'll be a full investigation. We don't know for sure how that Tomahawk hit that school. It just sounds like so far it's pretty clear that it was a Tomahawk that hit. But what I'm skeptical of is how the footage is right there. There's someone right there to film that school being hit. And then also it happened basically immediately at the beginning of strikes happening on Iran. And then thirdly, when you think of a regime like this, one of their biggest focuses is to put any of their headquarters, specifically any of the command and control for the IRGC underneath schools, connected to schools, in hospitals. Basically their focus and goal that CNN doesn't really know or just can't comprehend at this point is that this regime uses people as human shields. Does CNN get that? It's not about honorable warfare when you're up against a regime like the Ayatollah and the new Ayatollah, the Ayatollah's son. Same type regime. Their whole goal is regime survival and protection, and they're willing to just harvest and cut down their own people, even a school full of girls, because they see that as a way to protect their own regime. So hopefully that helps you guys understand a little bit about the propaganda that we're seeing coming out of CNN. So heavy airstrikes hammered Tehran overnight, hitting subterranean R&D complexes. That's research and development. That's a small acronym for you guys. Vital infrastructure related to drone production has also been hit, likely by B-2s and B-1s. Iran has fired back with missile waves at Israel and Gulf states, but most of these got intercepted. 90% interception rate. But the real headlines right now are President Trump's speech yesterday alluding to those recent B-2 Spirit strikes on the super fortified ballistic missile launching bunkers, along with CENTCOM releasing that actual footage of those sites and hinting at the potential sites where nuclear material is hidden under thicker granite, multiple layers, hundreds of feet deep, way deeper than what was struck in Operation Midnight Hammer. So this new setup meant that Iran was ready to rebuild after those hits on those less deep sites. And that lines up perfectly with the intel we have so far on Pickaxe Mountain near Natanz. Satellite photos show ramped up tunneling and fortification in the granite at Pickaxe Mountain. Those heavy Zagros mountains are perfect to build underneath granite that could protect centrifuges way better than what was protected during Midnight Hammer. Iran claims it's just centrifuge assembly for civilian uses, but experts say it's likely safeguarding enriched material or pushing prohibited work. So have those been struck? Have the vents been struck by the B-2s as well? that hasn't been confirmed yet, but looking at this from an intelligence and military perspective, it looks like that could make it onto the target list at any point here. Meanwhile, the IRGC is vowing heavier warheads now. Over 1-ton warheads is what they're saying they can put on their missiles, and they're rejecting any missile program wipeout claims. They're saying their missile program is fully functional, but we're seeing when these things come out and try to launch, they're being struck. And President Trump confirmed they can be struck within 5 minutes of actually launching a missile, which will likely be intercepted very quickly, and then the ballistic launcher struck. And Iran's IRGC is digging in extremely hard, with their foreign minister Pezeshkian basically coming out and saying there will be no negotiation. There won't be a liter of oil flowing through the straits unless Iran decides it. So they're saying no negotiation, no ceasefire, and they determine the war. Obviously, their propaganda arm is in full swing, and they're teaming up now with Russia's propaganda arm. They're like those weird, awkward brothers that show up to a party and don't talk to anyone else, and they just hang out in the corner and look at everybody and breathe heavily. Just creepy when it comes to the propaganda wings of Russia and Iran, and they're saying that they will control when the war ends. They're also saying they're blocking the oil flows until the attacks stop, which we've seen isn't true. There's actual flow through the Straits of Hormuz. However, the tankers are being very smart and they're turning off their transponder. But as you can see, propaganda maximum, level 10 for Iran, saying that no oil will flow through the straits. Meanwhile, yeah, there's a lot of oil flowing through the straits. So the oil markets did go down, and some are saying a lot of it's because President Trump hinted at the end of actual military hostilities in Iran, but it's also because oil is just flowing through the straits right now. And that's credit to the Trump administration for opening up the straits, having the ability to back it up with an insurance policy that says that they will pay for any damage done to any ships if they're struck by the Iranian regime. But they're also backing that up with hard military power, naval power that's also protecting ships in the Straits of Hormuz, and a third carrier strike group on the way. But Foreign Minister Agarachi flat out ruled out future U.S. talks and said that it was a bitter experience negotiating with the U.S. And President Trump mentioned that the U.S. was being tapped along until a potential first strike by Iran. That's what some of the intelligence was reporting. And as we've seen, Iran launching thousands of ballistic missiles at its neighbors into neighborhoods with its Shahed drones shows that, yeah, maybe President Trump's claim that they wanted to take over the Middle East holds a lot of water. I mean, why else would they have thousands of ballistic missiles pointed at their neighbors? And when they hit go, they're basically striking neighborhoods in Bahrain. They're striking water desalination plants. And likely the IRGC now is basing most of their operations near civilian sites like schools and hospitals to shield themselves with human shields. And this is straight out of Hezbollah's playbook. So it's straight out of their proxy army's playbook. Pickaxe Mountain, though, is the crown jewel, and it could be a hideout. There could be bunkers there for the actual regime itself. Deep tunnels, multiple portals, security walls, all in granite. A lot of bunker buster bombs, enough of them would likely get through, but that is an even tougher problem than what we saw before with Midnight Hammer. B-2s flying round trip from Whiteman Air Force Base, stealth all the way in, dropping precision 2,000-pound bunker busters on hardened missile sites that Iran buried to survive anything short of Armageddon. In their mind, that's what they thought they could do. Pickaxe Mountain potentially buried 330 feet under granite. That's deeper than all the spots at Fordo. Fresh concrete over some of the portals that are going into Pickaxe Mountain itself. And we're talking about sites that Iran thought were untouchable, but now have been lit up because of US tech and the resolve of the B-2. And the B-2 hasn't been said to actually have struck Pickaxe Mountain yet. And the capability of the B-2 can't be understated. So the US is building the B-21, but they're also ordering more B-2s because it's just so capable. And likely that will have way more updated avionics, a much better user interface, and again, such a capable platform, and that's why the US is buying more of those beasts. But the B-2 Spirit, that's got a 50,000 plus foot ceiling, 6,000 nautical mile range, unrefueled, total stealth profile, undetectable until likely those bombs drop and they see a little blip on the radar of the bombs themselves, and then it goes back to stealth mode. These birds carry heavy payloads like those 2,000-pound penetrators for hardened deep targets. Let's move to the 4D chess strategic analysis. analysis section, and you guys know I just love to say 4D chess as many times as I possibly can. This is classic multi-domain dominance. By degrading ballistic missile launchers first, we neuter Iran's retaliation punch. No more easy waves at Gulf allies or Israel could bring them closer to the table, but the IRGC looks like they just want to go down with the ship. And they know that if the free people of Iran actually come into power, there will be a reckoning and they'll have to answer for the hundreds of thousands of people they have slaughtered. But President Trump also mentioned that we'll go 20 times harder if you block the Straits of Hormuz. So to me, you want to keep the enemy guessing. So a lot of legacy news outlets are like, oh, they have a contradiction. They're saying something that's different from each other. But again, you don't want to tell the enemy exactly when the war will start or exactly when it will end or exactly what the next strategy is. You want to keep them guessing. So this is actually perfect, straight out of The Art of War that I love. Keep the enemy guessing, keep them on their heels, keep them backpedaling, not knowing what's coming. Oh, they're lightening up. Oh, they're increasing. That is the ultimate goal of warfare. So to me, this is extremely strategic. But again, a lot of the legacy news outlets are never going to give any credit for that because they just don't understand military action and force and how to actually use the military effectively. But right now, US and Israeli actions look decisive. Hit hard, hit smart, force the regime to either fold or just face total isolation over the next few weeks. All right, so let's do a quick hypothetical situation. So let's say Iran gets even more desperate and they decide to make moves on the Straits of Hormuz, mining the strait or firing on tankers to spike oil past 150. That might be their death throes, their ultimate desperate move. Gulf allies would activate defenses, but a few ships would probably get hit, a few oil tankers. Oil flows would likely be choked at that point, and then the proxies would ramp up. The U.S. carriers would surge along with land-based Air Force assets. B-2s, F-35s would go gloves off on the energy infrastructure of Iran, shutting down all of the different lights across the whole country and turning the entire country into a blackout. And at that point, we would see the air war ramp up with the different sites being struck that would take years to rebuild. So that wouldn't be good for the IRGC, but who knows? That might isolate them even further, but there's a lot of ripples and blowback from that situation because the free people of Iran would also be left without electricity. So wrapping this all up, the B-2 is rewriting the rules on how hardened targets get smashed, smashing missile sites, and even eyeing potentially pickaxe mountains granite by going after vents intakes instead of brute force this time. American stealth, precision, and sheer resolve are on full display with these B-2s and the other air assets in the region. And to me, once again, proving why the US military is the best in the world. So what do you think happens next? Do you think the IRGC will actually push to choke off the Straits of Hormuz? Let me know in the comments below. Would love to hear what you think. Go and follow me on X, follow me on Instagram. I'm posting there pretty much every day. Click the link in the description. Join the live streams. I do priority responses to the members of the lives. I'll see you on those lives happening pretty much every day at this point. Watch this next video that pops up right here. We'll see you on that video. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing off.